Yeah, not quite topic, right? Staring at a KTM dealer who's been very good friends to us and lent us lots of bikes over the years. But I've got a bit of a history of this. I went down to a BMW dealership last year and did a whole spiel on how I don't wear any body armor, and the guy's there with all his armor that he sells. He's like, so this is an awkward one too. My name is Ryan. I work for a company called Fortnine, which is an e-commerce retailer here in Canada. We sell jackets and pants and tires and engine parts and all kinds of stuff. And we're a local Canadian born and raised company, so if you want to stick it to the Americans, then yeah, stick it to the Americans. So that's what I do. I work on content, so I do the YouTube channel for this company. And right now, we're filming a video on KTM because this is sort of the big news in the motorcycle world at the moment. And we're shooting this on Tuesday. And so when I was asked to speak, I saw an opportunity to workshop something that nobody's heard yet, and hear about all the ways that I've messed this up and get some better ideas from you guys. So yeah, if you think of anything while I'm talking, definitely keep it in mind because I want to hear everything you have to say when we get to the back of it. So on November 29th of last year, KTM filed for insolvency. And this is probably one of the bigger pieces of motorcycle news in the 10 years that I've been doing this job. So I wanted to look more at how insolvency proceedings work in Austria and also some of the numbers behind them, because you hear all kinds of weird hearsay stuff. Let's see which button is going to make this go. That one? Yeah. So speaking of hearsay, so KTM put out their statement on it. These guys come on and say, yeah, we need a pit stop for the future. Today we have decided to transfer KTM to so-called legal restructuring proceeding with self-administration. And they're phrasing this as a pit stop that they've decided to do. The truth is that they don't have a choice. When you can't pay your debts on time, you are insolvent, whether you choose to take the pit stop or not. And on November 29th, the creditor called in a 247 million euro loan that KTM didn't have the money to repay. So they are insolvent, whether these guys choose to take the pit stop or not. Now with insolvency, you can't pay your debts on time. So you have all these people who are coming at you with lawsuits, asking for money, and filing for insolvency insulates you from that. So it gives you 90 days to renegotiate your debts. And nobody can bring legal action against you in that time. So that's the benefit. The embarrassment of it is that you have to open your books to public scrutiny. You have to file with the Alpine Creditor Association in Austria. And so for us, this is quite interesting because we get to look at KTM's books. This is something that consumers like us normally can't do. So whatever you hear about KTM, check this AKV page because the facts are published there, albeit in German. And Scheiße's iceberg is quite big. So KTM AG, this is the builder of the bikes, is in debt a little over 2.7 billion. To put that in perspective, their profits in 2023 were 108 million euros. So their interest on what they owe is starting to outweigh what they actually make. And this is why they have not much hope of digging out of this hole without filing for insolvency. There's some knock-on effects. So the way their company is structured, KTM F&E is their R&D department. It's actually a separate company. They're also insolvent to the tune of 105 million euros. They actually lost 9.3 million on their yearly in 2023. To put that in perspective, KTM Components built some stuff for their bikes, also in debt about 80 million, and they made 7.5 million in 2023. So these are the kind of the knock-on effects of this. I mean, there's been some foundries in Austria that have gone insolvent as well. They have a web development company that does their website that also went insolvent. All of this is under the Fire Mobility Group. So when the big ship goes down, the little ones kind of go too. The interesting thing here, to me, is the number of creditors for each of these companies. So the bike maker and the R&D and the components department together are indebted to over 2,500, about 2,500 individual creditors. So in Austria, any person that can hold rights and obligations, an individual, a child even, can register for insolvency proceedings if they feel that they're owed by KTM, and then they get to vote in what happens. So the reason this is quite pertinent news is on Tuesday, in 2 days, is the vote. So these 2,500 people get to vote on what becomes of KTM, and we'll see. So big news will be coming on Tuesday. One option in insolvency proceedings, as with bankruptcy, is always the realization of the assets. So they essentially liquidate the company, sell the IP, sell the bikes, sell the factories, and try to pay the creditors with what's left. The insolvency administrator estimates that would generate about 12% repayment for every person who's owed money, which is fast money, but not fantastic money. What KTM is offering is 30%. So they've submitted a proposal to these 2,500 people who are out there money, and they're saying we're going to give you 30% of your investment back over the next 2 years, which doesn't sound like a great deal. If you call up KTM and ask for the new 1390 Adventure and offer them 30% in 2 years and we forget about the rest, they're not going to be that stoked about that offer either. But the alternative is that maybe you don't get your money back at all, or maybe you only get the 12% from liquidating the company. So 30% in 2 years is what KTM proposed. Over the last few days, they've improved the offer, and they're now offering 30% in May. So that indicates they probably have a deal near where they're selling a chunk of the company, and with that cash are going to pay back the investors so that they can get the plan proposed and the company can survive. That's the situation as it stands. But on Tuesday, very important day, and we'll know more about what happened. Right now we have a video kind of 60% shot on this, and then on Tuesday, whatever happens, we'll cover the rest and then hopefully get that video kind of quickly. Where does that leave us now? So KTM has halted production. They've halted production for a few months now, so nothing's being made in Mattigolfen. On top of that, there's a bit of a brain drain. So when you're insolvent, none of your employees are obliged to fulfill their contracts. So there will be employees who have left KTM just because they don't have to stick around to see what comes out of it. There are also employees who haven't been paid in a while and will have left for that reason. The other thing is that the companies that work for you are not obliged to fulfill their contracts while you're insolvent unless they have security, which no one does. So Bajaj, CF Moto, companies that are building parts for KTMs aren't obliged to be building them right now. And so when production starts again, it will probably start very slowly because there will be a backlog of unmade components. On top of that, much of the motorcycle industry works on credit. So if you want to sell a bike, you'll buy or borrow some engines, build the bike, sell it, and then 2 years later pay back the company that made the engines. Now that KTM has made a few people lose their 70% dollars, they're all going to want cash up front, sort of 0-day payment terms, and so it'll be quite difficult for them to get this machine running again, having very poor credit as they do. So there may be a dearth of KTMs in 2025, 2026, potentially. If there's a silver lining in all this, though, and it could also be called the root of the problem, KTM is sitting on a lot of unsold bikes. There's estimates that say they have $1 billion in unsold stock, about 265,000 bikes. A year's worth of bikes sitting unsold. So that's arguably the number one factor as to why they're insolvent. If they had an extra $1 billion, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So we'll go into why, or some reasons why people think that bikes are unsold. I want to preface that by saying that I actually really like KTM. I want KTM to survive. In the time I've been in this industry, they've been sort of the most interesting motorcycle manufacturer. They're kind of that spiky orange mohawk kid who says all the dumb shit that everyone's thinking and no one else is willing to say. So in the last 10 years, they've asked like, what happens if we give an adventure bike 160 horsepower? What happens if our beginner bike has racing rear sets? Would Greenpeace notice if we just kept making 2 strokes? They're good, fun questions for motorcyclists, and myself and most of my friends are desperate for KTM to pull through this because they're such a fun company to get to ride their products. So I say that as a way of sort of sugarcoating what we're going to go into, which is some of the reasons that KTM has been perhaps not selling those $265,000 billion worth of bikes. So yeah, here's some chuckles. This, if you're unfamiliar, is the chocolate camshaft, the infamous chocolate camshaft. So about 2018, 790s, Adventures and Dukes Started showing some premature camshaft wear. Looks like it was sort of not on piece of chocolate. It's some pretty low kilometers, like 20, 30,000 kilometers. I had a look in my buddy's 790. It didn't look like this, but it was showing some pitting, and it looked like maybe the metallurgy was not as good as it could have been. For years, KTM sort of maintained that there wasn't an issue. Maybe you changed your own oil and you messed it up or whatever. And then in 2021, parts of the 890 actually got redesigned. So it got wider cam followers, it got a secondary oil screen. So the problem is fixed now, but it was totally fine before. KTM maintained that it's fixed now, but it was totally fine before. And then it wasn't until a few years later, in 2024, that they came out and sort of acknowledged the problem and say, yeah, we have some metallurgy issues going on here, and they offer some widespread goodwill fixes, so everyone gets it fixed. And that's pretty cool. It's a shame that they let it drag for the amount of time that it did, because it did a lot of damage to their reputation. We're actually talking about a very small number of bikes here, like less than 1% of the motorcycles were affected with this. So it's a small issue, and if corporate had steered right into it, it probably would have been a non-issue. But because of the way it was handled from the top, it did some pretty significant damage to the way people thought about KTMs. That leads into a discussion of reputation. So another corporate strategy that was hugely unpopular was KTM's demo mode. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this. These are YouTubers. These guys are assholes. YouTubers are just sensationalist morons who don't pay any attention to what they say. They're not real human beings. But basically, if you buy a new KTM, it could have heated grips, a quick shifter, cruise control, and at 1,500 kilometers, those features stop working. This is not true in all markets, but it's true in some. And that's weird, right? Nothing mechanically changed. You can see the heating element, you can see the quick shifter pickup. Well, it turns out the mechanic has to remove $8,000 from your wallet, and then the features start working again. And that's what they're calling demo mode. Consumers really hated it. Again, KTM had a very tenable position on this. It was that without demo mode, you have to go in on the showroom floor, guess at what you want. Maybe I'll get heated grips and I'll pass on the quick shifter. And then maybe a few months down the road, you realize, I really only ride in good weather. I'm not using heated grips. It would be nice to slam those upshifts. Maybe you go back and pay for it then, or maybe you're just stuck with a bike that's not really right for you. So KTM, in contrast with demo mode, everyone gets to try all the features for 1,500K, and then they choose just the ones that actually matter to them and that they actually want. So in theory, this should just save people money. And that's all absolutely true. There's just a fatal flaw in the fact that people hate it. People really, really hate it. And so that was a damaging thing for them as well. It has been for other companies. Zero did this. You can pay a little more to unlock some power. Everyone hated that. BMW famously offered a subscription service for their heated seats, $18 a month if you want your heated seat to work. And they had to walk that back as well and just not offer it anymore because it was so disastrously unpopular. So there's been a few things on the corporate level really coming down from the top that have damaged KTM over the last little while and perhaps contributed to that massive backlog of bikes that people are not wanting to buy at the rate that KTM thought that they would. But the biggest thing, by far, while we're talking about corporate poor leadership, is just the debt that they've racked on. So we're probably, let's do this first. So 20, 30 years ago, KTM was a niche maker of like 6,000 bikes a year. Mostly competition machines, some dual sport stuff, but some pretty high-end orange performance machines. They ramped production to 6,000 bikes per week over the last couple decades. So it's really like a massive increase in production, which is all well and good if the bikes are selling. And much of that growth was motivated during COVID. I'm sure we all remember during COVID you couldn't get a bike for love or money. Everyone was looking for a hobby that they could do close to home, and everyone wanted them. At the same time, the interest rates were really, really low, and so money was cheap to borrow. You probably thought through this, as many of us did, and realized that that was, to be polite, a double-edged sword, to be impolite, a double-edged dildo. It's going to scream on both ends. Like the interest rates are going to go up, and the value of your motorcycle is going to go down as suddenly the demand drops off, and we have the oversupply that was cooking during all those COVID years. many people realize this, you probably realize this, but you're not a board member on a billion-dollar company, so KTM didn't seem to plan for the realities of COVID. So their interest rate's gone up about 6%, the demand for their motorcycles has dropped about 27%, and so they're left with a lot of bikes and suddenly very expensive debt that they acquired to build them on. And we're not just talking about the KTMs that they overproduced, we're talking about the 220 million euros that they borrowed to buy a controlling stake in MV Agusta. They recently sold this back to the family that owned it previously. 370 million euros were borrowed to start an e-bicycle company. And also Husqvarna and Gas were acquired, not just during COVID, but slightly previously. There's sort of a logical fallacy here too. You're looking at basically the 250 four-stroke, so the SXF, the FC250, the MC250 from Gas. These are all three of them basically the same bike. KTM is using one model under different brands, and when you go from selling one bike to selling one bike in three colors, you don't sell three times as many, right? More like a third of each color, and that seems to be something that's at least on their projection sheets was something that they weren't expecting, though you could argue that they should have foreseen it. So that's why this picture is pretty lonely. So these two guys are what's left of KTM's board. It used to be 6 people. Now we have Stefan Peter, he's the always face of KTM and CEO, and Gottfried Neumeister, who was brought on as his co-CEO a few months ago to spank him. They've switched titles now, so Gottfried is now the CEO and Stefan's the co-CEO. Spanking, I think, is well and truly underway. If we pull it right back around to where we started, like the real loss in all of this is probably for Austria. We've already had 700 builders that have been let go in Austria. The Austrian MotoGP teams are almost guaranteed to exit racing after 2026. It's something that the AKV put on paper and said that KTM needs to do this. The racing teams have since come out and say, no, we're very committed, we're going to find a way, we're going to keep competing. When they're so far in the red, it's hard to imagine how they can justify spending on racing, but that's happened. The other thing the AKV has put down in the court filings is that there will need to be a relocation away from Mattergoffen should production resume. So it may be partial, there may still be bikes built in Austria, but KTM will undoubtedly be less Austrian when it comes out of this. And remember to pay back the 30% that they're proposing to a vote, which may not even get voted through, but if the vote gets passed, they still have to pay that 30% of the 2.9 billion that they owe, and they don't have the money for that. So the only way to do it is to sell a large chunk of the company. Right now there's 3 letters of intent on the table, so one from a Hong Kong private equity firm called Fountainvest, one from CF Moto in China, and one from Bajaj in India. And so however KTM gets continued, it'll probably be quite a bit less Austrian. Having said that, the good news is that all of these companies know the value in a recognizable badge. So KTMs are not going away. There will always be orange bikes. There will always be KTM badges. The IP, like the 890s and the 1390s and that sweet looking 390 Adventure that they just put out, that'll almost undoubtedly continue because that's where the value in the brand is. So the good news is that, yeah, they're probably too big to fail and those bikes are going to be coming. And that's great for us motorcyclists because they're honestly some of the most exciting bikes around. It's just that the ownership of them will probably be a whole lot less Austrian than it used to be. That's sort of the gist of it. And remember, this is kind of a workshop for a video that's not out yet. So if any of you have questions or ideas or things that I've perhaps neglected, then I would be very, very curious to hear them.
How do you interest the Honda rider?
How do you interest the Honda rider? Am I as KTM, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah? It's a good question. Do you have an idea?
I'm trying to listen.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, it's, I mean, yeah, that's a tough one. How do you interest the Honda rider?
Just heard you talk about KTM so much. I just like to talk about riding.
About riding Hondas specifically?
Just riding.
Just riding? Oh gosh. I just got back from a ride around the world. In September, we went Anchorage to Miami, Lisbon to Istanbul, Mumbai to Calcutta, Bangkok to Singapore, and Perth to Sydney. Some of the best riding I've ever done.
This year?
September, so last year. Yeah, it was really cool. Took some time away and just got back to Ripon, which was fun. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Did you video that?
Yes. While we were riding it, we shot kind of in the trench stuff. Sorry, who asked that? You? Yeah, so while we were videoing it, we shot like the kind of dock style stuff. I'm so tired, everyone's so tired, we're messing up at the border, this kind of thing. The impetus of it was to try to break the round world speed record, which is a thing that exists. It was like 19 days, 19 days and 4 hours, I think. And so we were trying to break that. So we got some dock style stuff, but now we have to go back. Because when you think about a movie, like a travel movie, you want to see big landscapes, you want to see nice riding shots, and none of that is gettable while you're trying to be as fast as possible. So the good news is that, I'm just about to head back to Istanbul, just about to head back to Mumbai, and then later some of the other parts, and we'll fill in the rest of the film. So yeah, there will be a film. But I didn't actually want to talk about it. I screwed up. I didn't want to talk about it at all because it would be such a tease. The film that we're talking about is probably like December. So it's pretty far away, but it'll be cool when it comes.
Yeah, it was really shitty planning on your part. Now you got to go back.
I know. More motorcycling. What a shame. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I'm gonna be boring and put you back on topic.
Thank you.
The MV Augusta thing struck me as really weird because that was quite recent, wasn't it? Like, they had known that the bank balance wasn't looking so good.
Totally. Yeah, it was quite recent.
Your question.
Yeah, the question was about MV Augusta. And I can crack my beer fully.
Sorry, the question was just about why KTM would have acquired MV Augusta, because that was quite a recent acquisition, and they had to know their finances were in the toilet already when they did that.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Something that you sometimes see in companies is they'll acquire something because it looks good at the next quarter. So they're looking for like quite a short-term solution for their books. It might have been something like that. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure otherwise. They owned it very briefly. It seems like they did very little there. And they sold it right back to the same family that owned it previously. So, yeah, I would guess that that's...
And Harley tried it. Harley bought him in Augusta for a while, right? Harley Davidson?
Yes, they did.
Harley Davidson bought MV Augusta. That failed.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, this just seems like a bad company to buy if you're a motorcycle conglomerate. Seems to be a bit cursed for everyone else. Yeah.
Do you figure that KTM's research department Insolvency will make their bikes less interesting in the future?
That's my worry, yeah. My biggest worry, if people didn't hear it, was that will the insolvency of KTM's research department make the bikes less interesting in the future? That would definitely be my fear. When you're cost cutting at every corner and trying to turn the books green again, you usually are not spending for some more riskier endeavors. Yeah, it could be. At the same time, they may start to repurpose platforms, right? Like we're kind of seeing with the 390. I mean, that was obviously in the oven for a while. But it could be quite cheap to take a platform and turn it into an enduro bike and turn it into an adventure bike. So we could see a little bit more of that. They've slashed their budget for Moto 3 a lot too. And if you're less involved with racing, then that can make your products a little bit less interesting as well. So there's less of that trickle down going on. So, but we'll see. I think like Bajaj and CF Moto have been working with KTM for a long time. I think the Pyro Mobility Group is the CF Moto importer in Europe, and Bajaj produces some KTM. So there's a lot of interplay. Bajaj actually has, I think, almost a 50% stake in KTM already. So they know the brand very well, and I think they know it well enough to know that KTMs have to stay sharp. They have to stay a little bit radical. It would be better for them to stay less reliable if they were more exciting. To be honest, because we have Hondas, right? Like we don't need more super reliable motorcycles. KTM filled a niche for something that was pretty rad, and yeah, maybe it would go kaboom on you sometimes, and that was part of the fun, right? And I think Bajaj and CF Moto understand that, and I hope that they keep it going because, like I said, we have Honda, we have Suzuki, we have Kawasaki, so yeah.
What do you think is going to be the next big thing in adventure bikes as far as either the size of the bike or the particular brand?
Yeah, I'm looking a lot at China with 450 MT, the Ibex. We're starting to see really competitive platforms coming out of China that undercut on the price quite a bit. So I think that'll change the industry within the next year or two. What else are we going to see? We've kind of had the middleweight revolution, like the 790 Adventure and T7 kind of kicked it off, and now everyone's made their parallel twin middleweight adventure bike. So it'll be interesting to see if we see them start pushing right into the lightweights, like 390 Adventure. It'd be cool to see more manufacturers doing that kind of thing. We've got a KLE 500 coming, the Kawasaki parallel twin, not a KLR kind of bike, which would fit into that mold too. So yeah, I think more Chinese stuff that's really cheap, and then that might push more of the legacy manufacturers to make cheap adventure offerings, which will out of necessity be small, 300, 400 cc's. Yeah.
So what's been the fallout for you personally and industry for your rejection of passive armor? Have you seen the growth in airbags? Is that technology going to come upon us?
Sorry, I missed the last part of that question.
Is the airbag technology going to come to fruition in some way that's both affordable and off-roadable?
Are airbags coming to fruition that's affordable and which?
Off-roadable.
Off-roadable? Yeah, I think they always were. I mean, the Helite Turtles were always pretty affordable and off-roadable, and that the tethers are cheap, and reloading them is pretty cheap, and yeah, they kind of work fine off-road. So it's...
Yeah, but they're shitty, the protection isn't as elegant as the more expensive ones, and the style of them is, let's call that, limited.
The style is inelegant for sure. The protection I respect quite a bit. They puff up huge compared to a lot of competition. The really question there is like if it fires, right? If you got a tether, there's always the question of you staying close to the bike and not firing it. So yeah, that's there. For sure, we had no effect on the airbag markets. We don't flatter ourselves in that we have that kind of sway in the industry. So I think airbags are exactly where they have been in the last years, where they're a pretty fringe item. You've got less than 1% of motorcyclists using them right now. And I think they'll probably stay that way for quite a while, unfortunately. I'm a big believer in them. I ride in them. If you don't have an airbag, you should probably get one. You wouldn't turn the airbags off in your car. It's a pretty good idea.
How much pain did you take for taking that opinion?
On airbags or on armor?
On armor.
Pain? We took a lot of flack. It's probably my most unpopular opinion. And so we had a lot of people say like, this is dumb, you're wrong. But that's good. I mean, if you're not getting that feedback sometimes, you're probably not being true to yourself, because nobody has entirely mainstream opinions, right? Most of my opinions seem to resonate with most of our audience, and it was cool to hop on one that was actually really unpopular. So that was interesting. Yeah.
We've got two more questions that we can do here.
So what do you think about automatic transmission?
Automatics, yeah. I think there'll always be the question was, what do I think about automatic transmissions? I think there'll always be like a strong minority in motorcycling. A couple of reasons for that. One is that the DCT systems are pretty heavy. They add a good bit of weight to the bike, and in a car you don't notice, but on a motorcycle, you know, they're lighter vehicles to begin with. So if you're talking about like 20 kilos on a 200 kilo bike, that's actually significant. The other thing with automatics is that they're harder to ride in slow speed maneuvers. I know you can. I've had a DCT around the concourse, and you can do it by riding a lot of the rear brake, but there is a lot to be said for having a clutch to modulate when you're doing the really low speed turning stuff on the bike. And again, that's a problem that doesn't exist for cars. They're four wheels and they're naturally balanced, so they don't have to worry about it. So I think automatics have a very different use case in motorcycles than they do in cars. Cars not noticing the weight, cars not noticing the low-speed jaggedness of them, and then also cars being very practical vehicles where people want to sit in traffic and be comfortable and get to work on time. Motorcycles here are mostly a recreational thing where people like to hear and like choose the gear when they want it. So I think it'll always be like a fringe thing, right? Like gold wings, things like this, there will be a use case, but most motorcycles I think probably not. Electric bikes obviously will be automatic, and that makes a ton of sense.
Last question.
What's the future of electric?
You guys ask big philosophical questions. What's the future of electric? In what we think of as motorcycling, I think it's limited in scope. The battery density is a problem, mostly with weight again. So you can have a Tesla that weighs like 6,000 pounds, it doesn't matter, or you just load it with batteries and it's fine. On a bike, it can't get that heavy because you won't be able to pick it up off a kickstand and balance it. So that you're really limited in terms of how you can package the battery. It still has to fit between your legs as well. So you're much more limited in what you can put on a bike. And then the other thing is that cars can be made very slippery. Like the aerodynamic coefficient of the Tesla is like a 0.19 or something. It's like really, really slippery. But riders are always just, this is your torso and it's gonna be what it is. And so that means that we take a lot of wind resistance on the highway and the range just gets tanked. Like even the best zeros, like if you jump on the highway and try to like go to Kelowna, you're not gonna make it, not even close. You probably will make it like 150K, like on some of the best ones, which is not a great range for most people. The place where electric really, really works really great is like motocross and trials, anything that's friction limited, because at any given time, the dirt can only take like a few horsepower, like 3, 4, 5 horsepower, depends how tacky the terrain is. And so if you have a traction control system, you can make sure the bike only ever puts out that much horsepower, and then the battery lasts a really long time. So I've ridden some electric motocross bikes and some electric trials bikes where I've been knackered like way before the battery's dead. And then you're going through the forest and you can hear the birds and the wind, and it's better. Like it's better. If I was in the market for a motocross bike or a trials bike, I would want an electric one if I could afford it. So there's a spot for them there. But I think in adventure motorcycling and sport bikes and touring, we're just a really long way from the density. Yeah.
All right. I think we're gonna call it there and